Hello friends, I won't take much of your time. I just ask you to subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
By the time the bridal shower finally arrived, there was no part of me left that believed any of this was just coincidence. No innocent misunderstanding I could wrap myself in for comfort. What Jessica had done, what she had been doing for months, was not a matter of petty rivalry or a few off-color jokes at my expense. It was deliberate. It was personal. It was war disguised in pastel tablecloths and frosted cupcakes. And I had been invited as both guest and victim. I hadn't told anyone about the ring, not Eli, not my mother, and certainly not Tommy. I had no proof, no witnesses, and if I confronted her, she'd smile and deny it so effortlessly, I'd end up looking hysterical. She'd mastered that art, appearing poised while quietly unraveling the people around her. But I wasn't planning to expose her by making noise. I knew better. I'd learned the quiet ones are the ones who hit the hardest, because no one sees them coming. The shower was held in a rented historic house in the nicer part of town, one of those old Southern-style mansions with wraparound porches and antique chandeliers that looked elegant in pictures but smelled faintly of mothballs and damp wood. Jessica had spared no expense. There were personalized welcome signs, hand-lettered menus, a mimosa bar with too many options, and enough white balloons to make you feel like you'd stepped into a Pinterest board curated by someone on the edge of a breakdown. Everyone was dressed in soft florals or pale blues, the kind of carefully selected palette that screams, "This is all being documented for Instagram, so don't screw up the aesthetic." I wore black, not just because I was in mourning for whatever scraps of a relationship Jessica and I once pretended to have, but because I wanted to stand out. Not obviously, not disruptively, just enough to make people notice me without quite understanding why. When I walked in, I saw heads turn, not in a flattering compliment your dress kind of way. It was more like curiosity tinged with hesitation, as if they weren't sure whether they were happy to see me or concerned that I might cause a scene. And for once, I didn't care. My mother greeted me with that tight-lipped smile she used whenever she was embarrassed by me, but trying not to show it. She hugged me stiffly, her fingers brushing against my back like she was checking for weapons. "Rachel," she said under her breath, "could you at least pretend to be happy for her today?" I didn't answer. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and realized for the first time how deeply she had taught me to shrink myself for the sake of others. It wasn't protection, it was control, and the older I got, the more it looked like betrayal. Jessica made her entrance 15 minutes later, descending the staircase like royalty, dressed in a white satin dress that clung to her like it had been sewn onto her skin. She beamed at everyone, waving, laughing, hugging, radiant in that way. Only someone completely convinced of her own untouchability can be. She saw me across the room and tilted her head just slightly, her smile tightening. Not surprise, not fear, just that flicker of unease you get when you see something you thought you'd already buried come back to life. She didn't come over to greet me, which was fine. I had no intention of small talk. I busied myself at the drink station, sipping something tart and pink while scanning the room. That's when I saw Lana. She was leaning against the far wall, arms crossed, watching everyone like she was mentally undressing them layer by layer, not their clothes, but their masks. She saw me looking and gave the smallest nod, then turned her attention back to the crowd. The game started about an hour in, with the usual forced laughter and performative competitiveness. Jessica's friends cooed over each trivia question about how she and Tommy met, what his favorite meal was, what Jessica's signature dance move looked like. At one point, they asked everyone to write advice for the bride on a little card and place it in a box. I stared at the blank card for a long moment before writing a single sentence. The truth doesn't go away just because you refuse to name it. I folded it in half and dropped it in the box like a coin in a fountain. Lunch followed, then gifts. Then came the moment they called the open mic section. An idea, no doubt, born in a group chat fueled by too much wine and not enough good judgment. It was supposed to be for toasts, well wishes, shared memories. One by one, women stepped up to say sweet things about Jessica, about love, about weddings and memories, and all the other recycled sentiments people think they're supposed to say when faced with expensive hors d'oeuvres and a woman in white. And then Lana stepped forward. She didn't reach for the mic like everyone else had. She didn't ask permission. She just took it from the stand, adjusted it slightly, and stood there in silence until the chatter died down. She looked out at the room, her expression unreadable, her body perfectly still. "I wasn't planning to say anything today," she began, her voice cool but clear. "But sometimes silence starts to feel like complicity, and I'm not really the complicity type." A few nervous laughs scattered through the crowd, but they died quickly. "I've known Jessica for a long time," Lana continued, "and I know she wants this day to be perfect, memorable, all about love, so I want to give her something unforgettable." Jessica's smile froze in place. You could almost see the gears turning behind her eyes. She glanced at my mother, then at Tommy's sister, then back at Lana. I watched her fingers tighten around her champagne glass. "There's someone here," Lana said slowly, scanning the room, "who isn't who she claims to be. Someone who's been keeping a pretty important secret. And I think it's time we stopped pretending." The silence that followed was loud enough to feel physical. Every eye in the room turned, first toward Lana, then inevitably toward me. My heart slammed against my ribs, but I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just looked straight ahead, breathing slowly through my nose, letting them all wonder if I was about to explode. Jessica was the one who broke it. "Lana, what are you doing?" Her voice was light, rehearsed, but the tremor in it betrayed her. Lana turned to face her. "Do you want me to say it, or should I let everyone here keep thinking this is the fairy tale you've been selling?" Jessica's face paled. "Maybe now's the time to tell everyone about Aaron," Lana said. A beat passed, then two. Jessica stepped back like she'd been slapped. One of the bridesmaids gasped. My mother looked utterly lost. And just like that, the cracks began to show. For a moment that stretched longer than it should have. The room existed in complete and absolute stillness. The kind of stillness that doesn't belong in a place dressed up to feel like celebration. The kind of stillness that comes right before something important finally breaks. Jessica stood frozen in place, her mouth slightly open, her breath caught somewhere between denial and fury, while the rest of the guests stared, first at Lana and then at me, as if unsure which one of us held the fuse and which one held the match. The chandelier above us flickered faintly, casting moving shadows across the pressed tablecloths and wine-stained napkins, and it occurred to me, absurdly, that nothing in this moment was going according to anyone's plan. And yet it felt entirely inevitable. Jessica didn't speak. She didn't run, she didn't throw her glass across the room, or collapse in tears like in a bad soap opera. No, she did what I had always suspected she would do when the curtain fell. She turned cold. Not just quiet, but empty, her expression flattened, her jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscle twitch, and her eyes, once warm with practiced charm, became unfamiliar, like they belonged to someone who had never actually known me at all. "What are you talking about?" she asked finally, and her voice came out smooth, controlled, the perfect balance between offended and confused, calculated to make everyone around her hesitate before jumping to conclusions. But Lana didn't even blink. She held her ground with the casual confidence of someone who'd already anticipated every denial, every rehearsed lie, every pivot toward playing the victim. "You can keep pretending," she said, and her tone didn't rise or falter. "But you and I both know what happened with Aaron. And if you think I'm the only one who knows, you're not half as smart as you think you are." The name was out now, spoken clearly, publicly, and like a crack in a dam. It could no longer be ignored. Jessica opened her mouth again, but someone across the room whispered something, a question, a name repeated, and suddenly the tension was no longer just between the two of them. The guests were murmuring now, their confusion rippling outward like heat from a fire that had just started to spread. I glanced at my mother and saw something new on her face. Not disappointment, not embarrassment, but uncertainty, the expression of someone who suddenly realizes she may have bet on the wrong horse for far too long. I stepped forward then, slowly, not to draw attention, but to claim what had been taken from me. Not just the moment, not just the ring, but the dignity I had been asked to bury for someone else's performance. You said to let her shine, I said to my mother without raising my voice. So I stayed quiet. You said it wasn't the right time for me, that I could wait. That family came first. But all this time, I wasn't just waiting. I was being erased. The guests quieted again. All eyes turned to me now, as if I had just stepped onto the stage I was never supposed to be on. I reached into my purse, slowly, deliberately, and held up my left hand. From a hidden interior pocket, I pulled out the velvet box that I had once kept on my nightstand, then tucked away, then feared was lost. I opened it in front of everyone and slid the ring onto my finger. I'm engaged, I said calmly, simply, no theatrics, no false humility. We've been engaged for weeks, and I didn't say anything because I was asked not to, because I was told it would steal someone else's moment. But now I think you all deserve to know that while I was hiding this, someone else was hiding a hell of a lot more. Jessica's eyes locked onto the ring. For the first time since Lana had spoken, her expression cracked. It wasn't panic or guilt, not exactly. It was rage. But not the kind of rage that explodes and burns down everything in sight. It was a colder kind, the kind that waits, simmers, calculates, the kind that says, "This isn't over." Tommy stood near the back, stunned, confused, his hands limp at his sides, his expression unreadable. For all his flaws, for all the times I had felt overshadowed by him, I hadn't wanted this for him. I hadn't wanted his illusion to break like this, in front of people, with no chance to prepare. But I also wasn't going to protect him from the truth just because he didn't want to see it. Lana handed the microphone off to one of the planners and stepped away, brushing past me without a word. She didn't need to say anything. Her part was done. Jessica turned to me then, her voice tight and quiet, just loud enough for me to hear, but not anyone else. "You think you're clever," she said, and I could see her hands shaking now, just slightly. "I think I was kind for a lot longer than you deserved," I said, not flinching. She looked around the room, scanning for allies, but most of them had already started drifting toward the food table or out the door, pretending to need a drink, pretending not to notice. That's how these things go when the Golden Girl's glow starts to fade. People look away, not out of cruelty, but self-preservation. I turned to leave, but as I walked past my mother, she reached for my arm. Her grip was firm, not affectionate, and her voice, when she spoke, was clipped and low. "You ruined everything," she said, her eyes glinting not with sadness but anger. Real anger. The kind that builds over years of someone not behaving the way you think they should. I pulled my arm gently away. "No, Mom," I said. I ended what was already broken. Outside, the air was cool and quiet. Eli was waiting in the car. When I slid into the passenger seat and he saw the ring back on my hand, he didn't speak. He just smiled faintly, started the engine, and drove. We didn't talk much on the way home. We didn't need to. Later that evening, as I was brushing my hair in the dim light of the bedroom, I heard my phone buzz against the nightstand. I picked it up expecting a message from Eli, or maybe even Lana. It wasn't either. It was a voicemail from an unknown number. I listened. The voice on the other end was low, familiar in a way that made my stomach twist. "Hey, Rachel, I know this is going to sound strange, but I think we should talk. I think Jessica's been lying to both of us. Call me back, please." The message ended without a name, but I didn't need one. It was Aaron. And just like that, I realized the story wasn't finished. Not even close. It started with a text message from my mother, not a phone call, not a conversation over coffee, just a text. "Rachel, don't mention your engagement at the shower. Let Jessica have her moment. She deserves to shine." That was it. No emoji, no please. Just a command wrapped in faux consideration. I stared at it for a full minute before locking my phone and dropping it face down on the kitchen counter. My fiancé, Eli, was making pancakes, whistling some half-forgotten 70s tune. The smell of butter and vanilla filled the air, but my appetite had already vanished. He caught the look on my face before I even said a word. "Your mom again?" he asked without turning around. I nodded. "She doesn't want me to tell anyone about us. Not yet." Eli stopped flipping the pancake midair and let it land with a soft thud back in the pan. He turned around, leaned against the counter, and looked at me in that calm way of his, the way that somehow made me feel both seen and slightly ridiculous. "Because of the bridal shower?" he asked. I didn't answer, just shrugged, which was answer enough. He exhaled slowly. "It's just a ring, Rach, but hiding it makes it feel like something else." "I know," I said, and I did know. I knew what it meant. Because this wasn't new, not from her, not from them. Jessica, my younger brother's fiancée, was the golden girl, blonde, bubbly, church-going, PTA ready even without a kid. The type of woman my mom always imagined for herself if she'd had a second life. Her words, not mine. And me, I was the reliable one. Quiet, stable. The one who paid the family vet bill when Tommy's dog needed emergency surgery last year because he and Jessica were between jobs. But this wasn't the time for bitterness. Or at least that's what I kept telling myself as I slipped my engagement ring off my finger and tucked it deep into the pocket of my purse, like it was something I stole. It was a simple solitaire, nothing flashy. Eli had chosen it himself after overhearing me talk about how I didn't want something that screamed to "look at me." Funny how that worked out. I'd ended up with a ring meant to be invisible anyway. The bridal shower was held at a rented event space with too much lavender and too little light. Every chair had a satin ribbon, every plate had Jessica's initials printed on it, and her mother had paid for a caterer who served mini quiches with edible gold flakes. It looked like a Pinterest board and smelled like fake orchids. When I arrived, Jessica greeted me with a hug that was a little too tight and a whisper in my ear. "Thanks for understanding. Today's really important to me." I forced a smile and nodded, even though every instinct in my body screamed that something wasn't right. The way she looked at me wasn't grateful, it was triumphant. And I hadn't even done anything yet. Eli stayed behind for this one. Jessica had made it clear it was a girls-only event, though her cousin's husband was apparently an exception because he handled the photos. I knew better than to push it. It wasn't the hill I wanted to die on, especially not today. So I walked around, smiled at people I hadn't seen since high school, accepted hugs from women who used to pinch my cheeks, and pretended not to notice that every time someone mentioned Jessica's wedding, they glanced at my empty ring finger like it was an accident waiting to happen. Then came the games, those awful sugary games where you learn who knows the bride best. Apparently, Jessica's favorite drink was cucumber water, her childhood nickname was Bunny, and her dream honeymoon was anywhere but where Tommy wants to go. Laughter erupted after that one. I didn't laugh. I just kept sipping my lukewarm mimosa. About halfway through the afternoon, Eli texted me. "How's it going?" he asked. I stared at the message, fingers hovering above the screen, trying to come up with something light. Instead, I wrote, "Feels like I'm at my own funeral, but no one told me I died." He sent back a single word. "Leave? I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But then my mother walked by, saw me on my phone, and gave me that look. The one that said, 'This isn't about you, Rachel.' And she was right. That was the problem. It was never about me. Not when Tommy got caught drunk driving at 19 and I had to lie to the cops. Not when Jessica asked to borrow my favorite dress and spilled wine all over it and never returned it. Not when my parents skipped our first Thanksgiving together because Tommy and Jessica needed family time. I stayed. Toward the end of the party, Jessica stood up for a toast. "I just want to thank everyone here who's been part of our journey," she said, glowing like a magazine bride. "Especially those of you who've supported us no matter what. Even when it wasn't easy. It means more than you know." She paused and looked directly at me, not around me, not past me, at me. That pause wasn't a mistake. That was a warning. I forced a smile, clapped along with everyone else, and swallowed the rising anger burning at the back of my throat. The truth is, it's not that hard to stay silent. You just pretend your throat is a locked door, and every word is a thief trying to get out. But here's what no one tells you. After a while, silence doesn't feel like strength. It feels like surrender. And I was starting to wonder just how long I could keep surrendering without losing something I couldn't get back. As the last of the guests gathered for a group photo, I stepped to the side, checking my phone again. And that's when Lana, Jessica's maid of honor, walked over, holding her champagne like it was a dagger. She didn't smile. She didn't even look particularly friendly. She just said, "Funny thing about secrets, Rachel. They only stay buried until someone gets bored." Then she raised her glass and walked away. And just like that, I knew. The silence wasn't going to last much longer. The following week passed in a kind of emotional autopilot. The kind where you still get up, you still work, and you still answer your phone like everything's fine, even though you're not entirely sure if the ground underneath you hasn't already started to crack. I went to work, smiled at clients, picked up Eli's dry cleaning, and nodded my way through family group texts filled with wedding countdowns, florist updates, and arguments over which kind of napkin ring looked classier. Meanwhile, my engagement ring sat untouched in a little velvet box on my nightstand, tucked away like a souvenir from a trip I wasn't supposed to mention. Every time I opened the drawer to grab a hair tie or a receipt, I caught a glimpse of it and felt like I was cheating on myself. Eli didn't say much about the shower, but I could feel it in the way he moved around me, like someone who doesn't want to bump into a bruise. One night, he asked if I was mad at him. I told him no, then I rolled over and cried into the pillow in silence, because the truth was, I wasn't mad at him. I was mad at myself for letting people silence me so easily, for pretending that my engagement was something shameful when it should have been the most beautiful thing in my life. Saturday came around again, and Jessica had arranged a casual brunch and crafts day at her apartment for the bridesmaids and close friends. She called it a low-stress gathering, which, coming from her, meant full makeup, themed snacks, and a mandatory cute outfit. I didn't technically qualify as a bridesmaid, but she'd invited me anyway, probably out of obligation more than affection, or maybe to keep an eye on me. Either way, my mother had made it clear it would be polite to attend, so I did what I always did. I showed up and played nice. Jessica lived in one of those modern apartment complexes with granite countertops, faux exposed brick, and an aggressively cheery concierge who insisted on calling every woman ma'am, no matter her age. Her place was full of gold-rimmed coasters, fake succulents, and motivational signs about wine being the answer to everything. It was aggressively curated in a way that made me feel like a guest inside a catalog. There were about 10 of us there, and almost all of them were younger than me, laughing too loud and drinking rosé like it was a sport. Jessica was in her element, swirling around in a blush pink sweater dress, giving everyone little tasks. Tie this ribbon, glue this piece of twine, decorate this sign for the rehearsal dinner. I picked a corner seat near the window and focused on folding napkins into the shapes she wanted, even though I had no idea how this tied into a wedding. After about 30 minutes, Lana arrived, fashionably late, wearing dark jeans, a leather jacket, and a smirk that told me she didn't care what anyone thought of her and wasn't about to start now. The other women greeted her with slightly forced enthusiasm. Jessica's smile faltered for a split second before stretching wider, like a rubber band on the verge of snapping. Lana didn't bother helping with the crafts. She grabbed a drink, leaned against the counter, and watched everyone like she was waiting for someone to trip. I tried not to meet her eyes, but she found me anyway. She walked over slowly, her heels clicking like punctuation marks. "Quiet corner for the quiet girl," she said, setting her glass down and crouching beside me. "I like my peace," I replied, forcing a smile that I knew didn't fool her for a second. She tilted her head and looked at the folded napkin in my hand like it was some kind of joke. "You're not as invisible as you think, you know," she said, voice low. "I'm not trying to be invisible," I answered, still folding. She leaned in closer, close enough for me to catch the faint scent of her perfume, citrusy, sharp, Maybe not, but someone's working real hard to make sure you stay that way. I looked up. She didn't blink. Her eyes held mine like they were daring me to say something real for once. "What do you want from me?" I asked finally. Lana smiled, but it wasn't kind. "Nothing. I just think it's funny how the person being silenced is usually the one holding all the dynamite. You don't strike me as stupid, Rachel, so I have to assume you're just waiting for the right moment to light the fuse." I didn't know what to say to that. I hadn't thought of myself as dangerous. I hadn't thought of myself as anything, really, except sidelined. But the way Lana looked at me made me wonder if maybe there was more to this game than I'd been playing. She stood up, took another sip of her drink, and walked away without waiting for an answer. Across the room, Jessica was telling a story about her and Tommy's trip to Florida, laughing about how poor Tommy got food poisoning but still proposed at sunset. Everyone laughed. I stared at my hands. At one point, Jessica brought out an old-fashioned Polaroid camera and insisted on taking photos of everyone. When it was my turn, she handed me a stupid heart-shaped sign that said, "Still single but stunning," in glitter. I hesitated. She raised her eyebrows. "Come on, it's just a joke," she said, the way mean girls always say when they get caught. I held the sign. The flash went off. Everyone laughed again. On the way home, I sat in my car in silence. I didn't start the engine for almost 10 minutes. I just sat there, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror, wondering how many times I'd let myself be the punchline to someone else's spotlight. That night, I put the ring back on. No announcement, no fanfare. I just slid it onto my finger and let it sit there like it belonged, which it did. The next morning, Eli noticed right away. He didn't say anything. He just kissed my hand, smiled, and poured my coffee. Later that afternoon, as I was sorting laundry, I got a message. It was from Lana. No words, just a photo, a screenshot. It was Jessica, smiling in a selfie with a man I didn't recognize, time-stamped 7 months ago. And just beneath it, Lana had typed, "Still think silence is the smart move?" I stared at that image until the screen went dark. Then I turned the phone face down, walked into the kitchen, and poured myself a drink. It wasn't even noon. There's a point where discomfort stops being a background hum and starts to feel like a siren going off under your skin. That's where I was, on edge, brittle, and 2 seconds from snapping at anything or anyone who looked at me the wrong way. For days, I couldn't stop replaying that photo Lana had sent. Jessica, grinning next to a man who clearly wasn't my brother, caught mid-laugh, with her hand resting lightly on his chest, like they'd known each other for longer than just one night. It wasn't just the timestamp, 7 months ago. It was the body language, the comfort, the warmth. It was the feeling that I was looking at something I wasn't supposed to see. I didn't respond to Lana. I didn't know what to say. Instead, I buried the image deep in my camera roll, behind 100 photos of sunsets and dinners, and Eli with my dog, because I needed it somewhere close but not obvious. I wanted to forget it. I couldn't. Every time I saw Jessica post something online, smiling with Tommy, kissing him on the cheek, posing in front of wedding decorations, I felt my stomach twist into something bitter. I started watching her more carefully, listening to the tone in her voice when she mentioned my brother, picking up on things I'd ignored before. The little lies, the half-truths, the way she always managed to make herself look like the hero in her own stories. One afternoon, I decided I needed air. I took a walk without telling Eli where I was going and ended up near the coffee shop where Jessica used to work part-time when she first moved to town. I wasn't even sure what I was doing there, maybe just hoping I'd run into someone who remembered her. The barista was new. He didn't recognize her name, didn't care. I sat down anyway, ordered something I didn't want, and watched people come and go, wondering how many of them were living lives built on secrets too. That night, Eli found me folding laundry in the living room with the television on mute, staring blankly at a nature documentary I hadn't even realized was playing. He didn't say anything at first, just sat down across from me and waited. After a long pause, I said, I think Jessica cheated on Tommy. Eli blinked. What? I told him everything about the message, the photo, the man I didn't recognize. I didn't show it to him, though. I wasn't ready to make it real. He ran a hand through his hair and leaned back. You have proof? Lana has something. She hasn't told me everything, but she knows. She's pushing me to do something. Eli didn't speak for a while, and when he did, his voice was calm. You're not responsible for your brother's relationship. But if she's doing this, playing you, using your silence to hide bigger things, that's not just manipulation. That's war. War. The words sat heavy in the room like smoke. A few days later, I got invited to Jessica's final dress fitting. It wasn't an event I was supposed to be at. Bridesmaids only, close friends. But my mother insisted. Said Jessica wanted me there. Said she'd been asking about me. I didn't believe a word of it, but I went anyway. The boutique was sleek and cold, the kind of place where you're afraid to touch anything unless someone invites you to. Jessica stood on the pedestal in front of a wall of mirrors, beaming like she'd just won a pageant. The dress was beautiful, lace, elegant, understated, but perfect for her. She saw me come in and lit up. Rachel, I'm so glad you made it, she said, as if we'd just spoken yesterday, as if nothing was weird between us. I forced a smile, nodded, and took a seat in the back. I watched her turn this way and that, modeling for everyone like a trained performer, and felt this strange, cold distance between what I was seeing and what I knew. She caught me watching her and raised an eyebrow. You okay? She asked. You've been quiet, I shrugged. Just tired. Later, while everyone was fawning over the veil options, I stepped into the dressing area to find my purse. It had been left on a side bench, unzipped, with the contents just slightly disheveled in a way I knew I hadn't left them. I reached inside to grab my phone and froze. My engagement ring, the one I'd finally started wearing again, was gone. I checked every pocket, the lining, even the floor around the bench. Nothing. Panic rose in my throat. I went back into the main room, trying to keep my face neutral. Hey, I said, careful not to sound too sharp. Did anyone see a small jewelry pouch? I think I dropped something. A couple of the women looked around casually, uninterested. Jessica glanced at me, and something in her expression changed for just a split second. Not worry, not surprise. It was something closer to amusement. Nope, she said too quickly. Haven't seen anything. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see the sweet bride-to-be everyone else saw. I saw someone calculating, someone smug, someone who had just stolen from me not out of necessity, but out of spite. That night, I tore apart my apartment, hoping I was wrong, hoping the ring had somehow fallen out earlier and I'd just forgotten. Eli helped me look. He didn't ask questions, just moved with purpose and silence. But we both knew the truth before the search was over. She took it, and not because she wanted it, but because she wanted me to feel powerless. She wanted me to look at my bare finger and think about how easily something precious could be stripped away. She wanted to remind me that in her world, I didn't get to shine. And for a moment, I almost let it work. But later that night, I stood in the bathroom with the lights off, staring at my reflection in the mirror, and made a promise I didn't say out loud. I wasn't going to play nice anymore. I wasn't going to smile through the sabotage. If Jessica wanted to turn this into a quiet war, fine. I was done being quiet.